Welcome to the Dream Journal. From the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the power of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with listeners like you. A dream can be meaningful even if you don't know what it means. Here's today's music, created fresh for you by Rick Kleffel.
The Carrington Events.
Okay. Does a traumatic childhood doom you to unhappiness and dysfunction? Meet Wendy Correa, who overcame a horrific youth to become a music industry insider, hanging out with the likes of Joni Mitchell and Ringo Starr. And dreams led the way on some crucial steps of her recovery. Wendy's debut book is memoir, My Pretty Baby, Seeking Truth and Finding Healing. I am your host, Katherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. We'll be taking call-ins during the last 30 minutes of the show, or you can email us anytime at onair@ksqd.org. I'd like to get right to our guest. Let me read the bio to introduce her. I'll say hello, though. Hello, Wendy.
Hello, great to
Hi.
be here.
Thanks for coming on the show. Wendy B. Correa is a writer, yogi, hiker, and public speaker. She has worked in film, music, and radio. She holds bachelor's degrees in psychology and theater arts. A wife and mother, she resides in Denver, Colorado. My Pretty Baby, an Amazon #1 bestseller, is her debut book. And you can find out all about her at her webpage, wendybcorrea.com. And you can spell Correa, Correa, wendybcorrea.com. Okay, so thank you so much, Wendy.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Excellent. So I was wondering if we could just start out with a dream. Let's just start right out with that amazing jaguar dream that you told me about, and then we'll go into some of the history of trauma and what is ACEs. But let's just start right out in the dream world. So maybe you could tell me a little bit about that dream.
Sure. There was a time when I was living in Los Angeles and working in the music industry where I was feeling very powerless and untethered and unsure of myself, unsure of what was next for me in my life. And I dreamt of this beautiful, black, sleek jaguar that was reclining on a beautiful velvet couch, but its face was my face.
Wow.
And it was just one of those incredible Jungian peak dreams that was so vivid and so real and so incredible that when I awoke, I just felt very connected to my intuition and my personal power. And I felt the strength and the energy of that female black jaguar and felt like that was an opportunity for me to step into my own personal power for making some major decisions in my life.
Okay. Because up to that point, you had been feeling very powerless. You said that you were feeling stuck and didn't know what to do. And I'd like to talk a little bit about maybe some of the roots of that. There's of this trauma that you had as a child. Like how does childhood trauma affect us throughout our life?
So, yes, as I write about in My Pretty Baby, my trauma began with the death of my father when I was 7 years old. And at the time, of course, people didn't understand how important it was to help children process grief. So, first of all, I carried a lot of grief and loss and fear that my mother would also die. And then only a short few years later, my mother brought into our home the man who would become her husband, my stepdad, who suffered from alcoholism and mental illness. And so I was raised in a home where I was on high alert, constantly flooded with hormones, fight or flight hormones, adrenaline, because you never knew what was going to set him off, and you never knew when you would have to flee the house, or, if he was going to threaten to kill you.
Wow.
And so I was raised in that home environment, but also there was a lot more going on under the surface that I was not aware of family secrets.
Mm.
And my older siblings, who were 7 and 12 years older than me, were very distant from me. They were very emotionally unavailable. And I always wondered why, what happened to my family. So my whole life, it was easy to point to, well, my father died and then I had this stepfather, but there was more. And even as I was writing my book, I uncovered more.
Mm.
And I uncovered the big walloping family secret that
Oh.
I won't disclose because I don't want to give it away. But um, as I was writing my book, I think I mentioned to you, I also was studying all of the latest research on childhood trauma. And when I learned about ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences, and all the studies related to that, it was a huge aha moment for me that I was not alone. In fact, I have very good company.
Mm.
64% of adults have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience. And so, as I was writing my book, I realized this isn't just my memoir. It's not just my story.
Mm.
It's a story of millions of us. And so my memoir has become a call to action,
Wow. Okay.
for us to have these conversations that you and I are having.
Well,
Not only
that's
about dreams, but
yeah,
yeah.
of course. No, this is super important, and this is something why I really want to talk to you, is 64% of have experienced at least one adverse event. That's a huge number. Tell me,
Yes.
maybe give some examples of what constitutes an adverse event. I think you said there's 10 different
Yes, and so
ones.
the
Okay.
listeners can easily just Google adverse childhood experiences and take the quiz for themselves. They determine there's 10 basic questions that you can ask yourself to determine where you fall on the scale. So, you know, um, did you lose a parent through divorce or abandonment or death or other reason? Did you live with a person who had a problem with drinking or using drugs? Did your parents or adults ever hit each other or threaten
Mm.
someone in the family? Did a parent or adult ever swear at you or insult you or put you down? Did you ever feel that you weren't loved in your family? So there's 10
Wow.
questions, and what they've determined is 64% of people have at least one of those. And um, they also know that if you have a score of six or more, you are at risk for addiction, depression, other mental illnesses, and chronic diseases.
Oh,
And they
really?
do know that, IBS is one of the most diagnosed diseases in the United States. And they have found that women who have experienced adverse childhood experiences definitely do have a higher risk of irritable bowel.
Okay, so not only just mental illnesses, like you mentioned, depression and addiction and all that, but also physical ailments, including IBS and yeah, I could
Heart
imagine
disease,
heart disease. Oh,
heart disease, yes,
uh,
lots and lots of other chronic illnesses. And as Bessel van der Kolk says in his book, The Body Keeps Score, adverse childhood experiences, childhood trauma, it is not just an external event. This is
mm,
internalized.
okay.
And trauma does not just go away. And
Hmm.
so, also in my book, I outline. what I did over decades to heal. And I hope that it's a guidebook for others who maybe are just starting their healing journey and are not sure
Right.
where to start. Because when they say it takes a village, well, I had everyone in the village helping me,
I love that.
including Dreamwork.
Okay, great. Well, because what you're saying is like kind of horrifying. Like if I am like shaped by my childhood experiences, as we all are shaped by them, it's just terrible to think that there's no hope. But you're saying that that we can actually break free of some of these patterns. That is, it's not destiny, because our experiences do not shape us to be miserable and dysfunctional for the rest of our lives. But we need to be aware of this dysfunction and where it's coming from, and then do the work to get past it. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, and
Mm,
that was so acknowledging for me as I was doing all of this research and reading all of these books that thank goodness they have confirmed that all of the modalities that they've decided, that you can use to heal your life, to heal your body, are exactly the things that I intuitively sought out
mm,
starting with 40 years ago when I went to college at Humboldt State University and I signed up for a 3-day Zen meditation retreat.
mm,
And now they have found that meditation, psychotherapy, of course,
mhm,
bilateral music stimulation, listening to music, and also all of the somatic practices of yoga, dance, movement, hiking, massage. Meditation is in there as well because meditation stimulates the mind and the brain.
yeah.
But all of these things, spirituality. So I spent many, many years practicing Native American spirituality and also sobriety. I'm 38 years sober now.
Mm,
And so all of those things combined is why I believed, today I'm very healthy. I do suffer from IBS and I do still have complex PTSD and anxiety, but now I have tools to work with that.
okay.
And even though I like my readers to know that even though trauma is universal, so is healing.
Wow. Let me just say that again. Trauma is maybe universal, but so is healing. Mm,
Absolutely.
mm.
Yes.
Right. And so you found these particular modalities that were helpful for you. And I imagine there's many more that people can find if they just look around, follow their intuition, and recognize that they do have something that needs to be healed. Because I think a lot of times, like for me, I was very dissociated for much of my life, but I thought I was fine. I'm totally fine.
Mhm.
There's nothing wrong here, nothing to see. And that just kind of kept the lid on all of what was needing to come out to be healed. And so it sounds like there's many different ways to get healed, but one of the first steps is to recognize that we need to be healed.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And I have readers reaching out to me to say, thank you so much for writing this book because I recognize myself
Uh,
in your story. And now I want to begin my own healing journey, which, includes many of those modalities. And of course, people will be drawn to what is good for them. I mean,
hmm.
you may not be practicing Native American spirituality or Buddhism, but perhaps you can learn more about mindfulness
Yeah.
or art therapy, music
Mm.
therapy, um, forest bathing, hiking, being in nature. There's so many ways to heal that we now have scientific evidence to prove
Hmm.
that these things do work. Getting
Right.
massages,
Oh,
doing
yeah.
yoga, all the somatic. They do know too that in addition to psychotherapy, it is very important to do the somatic practices as well.
Hmm.
As Bessel van der Kolk says, the body keeps the score. And as a massage therapist,
Mm.
we say the issues are in the tissues. So
The issues are in the
and the
tissues.
tissues,
Love that.
the body actually does hold on to these traumatic events.
Right. So now I'd like to come back to that jaguar dream because this seemed like this came at a moment when you weren't sure where to go, you weren't really clear, and the jaguar had your face on the jaguar. What does that mean to you? What was that? How did that help you in that moment of your life?
Well, it was also during a period, this was like 1987.
Uh-huh.
We were, at threat of nuclear war with the USSR, and I was also having nightly uh, nightmares, apocalyptic dreams and they were like nightly,
Mm.
that the apocalypse had happened and everybody had to have one job. So you had to be able to contribute to society in some way. And I would wake up feeling like, what is my contribution? I had a degree in psychology and a degree in theater, but I was like, what good is that going to be in a post-apocalyptic world? And so I was really questioning my choices for going to college and what was my profession going to be. And it was then during that time that I had the Jaguar dream, and I decided that I wanted to be a part of the solution. So I
Mhm.
started taking civil disobedience classes, and during that time, we were wanting to pass a proposition on the California ballot to vote for a bilateral nuclear weapons freeze initiative.
Mhm.
And I wound up being a part of that movement. And there was a huge concert out in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl called Peace Sunday
Uh,
with all of the major stars and rock stars of that time and all of the major politicians and actors. And it was 100,000 people showed up.
Wow.
And California did vote for that initiative. It was passed. So that was to ask Governor Jerry Brown at the time to um, go to the powers that be, to Reagan, to go to the USSR to say, we want a bilateral nuclear weapons freeze initiative. Now, that may only be one step in the right direction, but you have to at least take the step. And so at that time, that Jaguar was me stepping into a place of power of
Mm.
what can I do to contribute? I wound up being, a backstage security guard
Ah.
um, at Peace Sunday,
Uh,
and that was my contribution. So instead of thinking that I had to do, something giant and had to make the huge splash, it was a lesson for me that every little bit of contribution does help. We are all connected by the great web of life,
right.
and our individual choices and actions do matter. So
Hmm.
that was what was very instrumental to me about that dream. And I
Right.
did another dream that I had during that time was simply, it was a technicolor dream. I was dreaming about a rose bud on the vine, and in my dream it was just technicolor slow motion as the rose bloomed.
Hmm.
And so that again was me. I was blossoming
Mm.
in my life.
I love that. So you have the rose blossoming, and then the jaguar in the jungle. Like it wasn't being like a bird in the jungle. It was like a jaguar, this powerful, beautiful creature, and then the blossoming, the slow blossoming. So the dreams seemed like they kind of highlighted these changes that were going on for you, and maybe even catalyzed some changes, or at least they catalyzed you to recognize the changes that were happening. Does that sound right?
Yes, and they
Yeah.
gave me comfort that
Yeah.
I was in fact blooming or that I was in fact powerful.
Hmm.
They gave me comfort that was coming from deep inside of me, my
Right.
own
Right.
psyche. It wasn't coming from an external place of someone saying, "Come on, you're powerful, you can do this." It was me
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
saying, "You can do this."
Because your face was on the jaguar. It was very clear. Because sometimes I'll have a dream about an animal, and it's like, yeah, but that's outside of me, and that's a little scary because that might be a dangerous animal. But your dream is beautiful in that it so clearly put your face on the animal, so it was clear that this is your jaguar nature coming into being.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So you got it involved in the music industry. Was this around this time when you were a security guard backstage and you met some
So
people
that,
or how?
well,
Oh,
that experience really did inform me because I met incredible people who, are in the, out into the space of how huge they are. This
mm,
was Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and Stevie Nicks, and um, you know, Jackson Brown, and all of the biggest stars of our time in 1987. And I realized that they really wanted to do something with their platform to speak out, to help
ah,
people, to
huh,
save the planet. So many of these rock stars also have, you know, in their hearts. Bonnie Raitt has always been a supporter of our forests
mm-hmm,
and so on. And so I really wanted to be a part of that world, but it wasn't until a few years later, through a friend of a friend, that I got a job in the music industry at a talent agency. And then from there, I moved to A&M Records. I worked in music publishing.
mm-hmm,
And then from there, I moved to Geffen Records and I worked in A&R. And then later from that, I moved to Aspen, Colorado to become a DJ on KSPN FM.
mm-hmm,
So, yes, I
mm-hmm.
spent about a decade in the music industry in Los Angeles.
Yeah, well, welcome back to radio. Here we are live on the
Yes.
radio. I sure
Yes.
appreciate this. And so I'm like, just curious, like we have a few more minutes before our break, and is there anything you want to bring up right now? Well, after the break, I want to spend a little time going into like how this unfolded for you, and maybe hear some more stories, some more dreams, some more things like that. But is there anything that you want to bring up at this point? Maybe we should go back to ACEs. Maybe this is a good opportunity to go back to this whole idea of the adverse childhood experiences, which is sort of pivotal in how you learn to heal yourself is first by recognizing that you needed healing.
Well, I knew that I needed healing 40 years ago,
Mm,
but and that's when I started, practicing Buddhism and meditation and yoga and Native American spirituality. And then when I was in the music industry in Los Angeles, I also found my way to sobriety. And but as I was writing my book only 5 years ago, is when I found all of the most recent research that's thankfully coming to the foreground
hmm.
on adverse childhood experiences. And now a lot of doctors are proposing that this quiz should be given in a pediatrics office. It should
Mm,
be given perhaps in schools so that we can recognize and start to treat people who do have adverse childhood experiences. But I think what is so important about it and to have this 10-question quiz is so that people can say, wow, I had no idea that those experiences mean a lot to my mental, emotional, and physical health.
hmm, hmm.
And perhaps this is a time for me to delve into this a little bit more about what I might need to do to heal myself. And I never realized that, oh, I have IBS. I wonder if it has something to do with what my childhood was like. and so on. I
Mm-hmm.
think knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
And when people realize you're not alone, a lot of people just live with this, like,
Mm-hmm.
well, that was just my childhood and I'm okay. And, everybody has something. And, it's, that's just life. I mean, there's a lot of things. We live in a society that really downplays um, adverse childhood
Yeah.
experiences to some degree,
Right.
that we're like, hey, just suck it up, buttercup. This this is life, this is just
Right.
the way it is. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't realize, not even real, like, recognizable trauma. Like, I was subjected to real trauma in my home and violence. But let's say you didn't even have well, nobody was mean to me in my home or violent. However, my mother my is a survivor herself of
Right.
some kind of trauma, or
Right.
my grandparents were survivors of the Holocaust, or my grandparents were immigrants and they came to this country with nothing and they just had to zip it up
Mm-hmm.
and keep one foot in front of the other to survive. And so there's a lot of layers to the ACEs. It isn't just trauma that is quite dramatic and visible.
Right, right. Well, you mentioned the phrase complex PTSD, and I think maybe listeners might not understand that. I wonder if you want to just say what that is compared to regular PTSD.
Yeah, so PTSD, of course, we usually think of as soldiers who are in war and they witness, some atrocity or they get shot, and that's a one-off event. But complex PTSD is chronic. It's when you have experienced over a lifetime, over a childhood, numerous events,
Mm-hmm.
essentially.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's also complex in that, perhaps it's in your own home, in a home with adults who are supposed to be taking care of you
Right.
and protecting you, but they're the ones who have inflicted some kind of trauma on you.
Well, this is one of the things I've wondered about why it's maybe not talked about more is that the adults taking care of the kids should be protecting the kids from these events, and so maybe that's why the doctors are afraid to like ask like the school age kids what's going on because the parents feel like they should have protected their kids better from that. So we need to take a short break. I want to come back to this very fascinating topic and maybe hear a few more dreams. And this is having this fabulous conversation. This is Wendy Correa, Correa. I'd like to let you know that the Dream Journal is broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Santa Cruz and co-broadcast live in San Jose by KCXU and podcast everywhere. Also, we are broadcast even Saturdays at KOWS up in Sonoma. The Wendy's webpage is wendybcorrea.com. And after the break, we'll be right back with your calls. Thank you. All right, you are listening to the Dream Journal, and I am Katherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork. I'd like you to thank all the online listeners. And we know that we are streamed all over the world. We're streamed live, and then we have many, many more podcast listeners who will listen starting Monday. And people really all over the world are definitely interested in their dreams. And if you want to help us nudge the algorithm to spread that interest in dreaming, please follow the Dream Journal on your favorite podcast app. And if you are inspired, leave us a rating or a review. It helps more than you know. You also could share an episode on your social media feeds. That's a wonderful way to get out the message of dreaming. But really, most importantly, I'm interested in having you talk to your friends about dreaming, because talking about dreaming really deepens the effect that they have on us. And I am all in favor of spreading the word about dreaming. And you could just introduce a conversation about dreaming with one of your friends by telling them about this podcast. All right, and who knows, maybe you'll find a new dream sharing buddy. Wouldn't that be great? So you also can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, and you find out about upcoming shows and pod drops. You can look at hashtag the Dream Journal and at Experiential Dreamwork. Next week, we welcome back to the journal the fabulous, intelligent, and warm-hearted Linda Yael Schiller. She will be talking about the power of healing your relationship with your ancestors. I'm looking forward to that. And today's guest is Wendy B. Correa, Correa, who has a new book out called My Pretty Baby, and it's all about healing from trauma, from childhood trauma, the importance of recognizing childhood trauma and then healing from that through whatever modality inspires you. There's really a huge array of different opportunities to heal from that trauma. So, so Wendy, where do you want to go from here? We have a lot of options. We could talk some more dreams. Do you have more dreams to share? You could talk some more about the ACEs. I think that's a fascinating topic about the trauma, the way childhood trauma affects us currently. About the back process of writing your book. It sounds like a lot of healing you did was involved in writing your book, and I'm finding that too. And as I'm writing, that it's very healing to explore my issues on the page.
Absolutely.
Mm,
I think, okay, so there's so much to talk about, but I did want to come back to the 64%
yes.
of adults who have at least 1 out of 10 ACEs. And so sometimes, somebody might ask, well, what about me? I didn't experience any trauma in growing up, and it doesn't really affect me, but it does. Since 64% of adults have been affected, then we're talking about it could be your partner, your neighbor, your friend, your boss. It has affected someone that you know and
Hmm.
that you love. And statistically, we know that adverse childhood experiences, people are more prone to be imprisoned or have
Hmm.
mental health issues or
Right.
addictions. So it is a public health issue.
Right.
It is something that is being addressed. However, slowly, it is being addressed. And the other thing that I like to say, we live in a culture of, like I said, just suck it up, buttercup.
Hmm.
And some people would be like, well, that was in the past. That has nothing to do
Right.
with you now. And why don't you just think positive thoughts?
Think positive thoughts. There it is.
Think positive
Right.
thoughts
Uh-huh.
and do your affirmations or whatever. And in her book of the same name, Whitney Goodman calls that toxic positivity.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of that in our society. But we now know that when we deny our pain, we deny healing. And that real resilience comes from facing what happened, not papering over it with a smile.
Mm.
And in my Buddhist studies, the beloved Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh said that the art of happiness is also the art of suffering well.
Wow. Oh, whoa, wait a minute. The art
The
of
art of happiness
yeah.
is also the art of suffering well.
Ooh, tell
In
me more.
other words,
Yeah.
we have to feel the pain. We have to
Mm,
sit with the pain. We have to acknowledge it and embrace it and allow it and not push it away or
mm,
paper over it. We have to feel the pain so that we can heal it. We must acknowledge, allow, embrace our suffering
mm.
in order to heal it. And that is one of the tools of the 12-step programs.
Ah,
We have to embrace it fully. We
okay.
have to feel the pain. Even as the great poet Robert Frost said, the only way out is through.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So, yes, in writing my book, I was immersed in the pain. Now, luckily, I was also in therapy again at the time to really help me process. And there are tremendous tools that therapists have today who are trauma informed. So I used a modality called EMDR, eye movement desensitization, that just helps the brain process traumatic events so they aren't so triggering.
Hmm.
We, of course, still remember what happened, but it doesn't emotionally and physically trigger us as such. I also used another modality called IMTT, image transformation therapy, which also is a gentle way of processing traumatic events and anxiety. So, yes, while writing is very cathartic, also just in writing it out, Joan Didion said that if she understood herself in the world, she wouldn't have to write. She wrote
Hmm.
to understand herself better, to understand the world better. And in me writing My Pretty Baby, it helped me to put down on paper, to look at it, to understand it more thoroughly. And even as I was writing, I was able to draw upon the compassion for my family, for the
Hmm.
people involved. But again, the drawing in the village, I was also bringing in my Buddhist studies of loving kindness meditations, of sending my family, living and dead,
Hmm.
loving kindness and forgiveness. So I do talk a lot about forgiveness in my book because that is also very healing, not to forgive for other people, but for yourself. As Jack Kornfield, the beautiful Buddhist psychologist and teacher, says, we forgive to remove this deep burden from ourselves so that
Hmm.
we can be at peace, so that we can live in grace. It is not condone what people said. It's not even necessarily to reconcile with the person. And I always say, I forgive them, but that doesn't mean I want to have lunch with them.
Love that. So it's not about saying that that action was okay. It's just that
Mhm.
I don't want to hold on to this toxic resentment any longer.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
That's
wow.
part of my healing. I'm forgiving to let go of that burden. The Buddha supposedly had said that, holding on to anger and resentment is like holding a burning coal in
Mm.
your hand as if you were then going to throw it at another person, but you're the one being burned. So we let go of that anger and resentment, not for them, not to release them of, what they did, but for ourselves, for our own healing. But then again, it doesn't mean reconciliation either.
Mm.
Sometimes having those boundaries with people and not engaging with certain people that are toxic or unhealthy for us is our being compassionate for ourselves, which
Hmm.
is where we need to start, is having that compassion for ourselves
Right.
first
Right. Right. And forgiving ourselves.
and forgiving ourselves also
Right.
for
Right.
perhaps staying in a relationship that was toxic and for
Hmm.
too long,
Hmm.
hoping for an apology, hoping that they would recognize
Hmm.
some way how their actions hurt us. And that's just like holding your breath for the rest of your life because a lot of times those things are not coming.
Right. So, Wendy, I have a question. You talked about backing up to about the suffering, the idea that art of happiness is learning to suffer well. How do I learn to draw the line between suffering well and wallowing and like picking out a scab? Because I can certainly build myself up and say, I'm so angry at this person. He ruined my life. And I just like not gonna like, well, maybe that's part of it is the forgiveness. It's because I'm not forgiving. But how do we know, wallowing is something where we just kind of ruminate and go over and over again with angry thoughts. And how do you draw the? Oh, and I can say, oh, I'm just suffering. Well, this is my suffering. How do I
Mm.
know the difference between those things?
Well, I wallowed. I did my fair share of wallowing, and I feel like the years that I smoked cigarettes,
Mm.
that was wallowing. And
Ah.
I was smoking to stuff down those feelings. And when I quit smoking, I cried for 3 months every single
Wow.
day. So
That's,
that was then my suffering well when I finally quit smoking
mm,
and I just allowed myself to feel those feelings.
mm,
And yes, after a while, we need to say, okay, I'm going to allow myself X amount of time to feel this. And then perhaps it's time
right.
to what I would say uh, from personal experience is now we need to change that wallowing and bringing in the good things. Now it's time just to fill myself up with beauty, with art,
Mm.
go to museums, go to, out in nature, go for a hike, go for a walk, watch birds, read books, listen to uplifting
Mm-hmm.
talks, listen to music,
Yep.
dance. I mean, I would only allow myself so much time wallowing, and then you need to rebuild yourself back up and say,
Okay.
I'm going to, fill that wallowing space up with something positive now.
Okay. Right. Right. I see. That's beautiful. Um, and you mentioned the addictive behaviors. In your case, it was smoking, and there maybe was alcohol and drugs and things
Alcohol.
like that.
Yes,
Okay. And so noticing the addictive behaviors is probably another thing to keep an eye out for. When I'm worrying about if I'm wallowing or not. Like if I have an addictive behavior or something destructive, like smoking is bad for your health. Maybe sugar or something,
of
whatever
course.
bad.
I'm 38 years sober and I'm just now
Oh,
starting to get a handle on sugar.
oh,
I mean, yes,
right.
many things can be addictive, but
Hmm.
the more that you're aware of how you're using a substance to make yourself feel better,
Uh-huh.
and how could you perhaps do something else to make yourself feel better than a substance, for instance.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful.
I mean,
Um,
yes, when I quit smoking, I did it through a Seventh-day Adventist church in Santa Monica,
wow.
California. They only wanted us to quit smoking, and there was nothing proselytizing about it. In fact, the preacher's name was Rocky, and I told Rocky, "You're my higher power now." And he would send us home every night with a gallon of water to drink in the next 24 hours, a little paper bag filled with gum, toothpicks, hot candies to suck on, and a list of things to do instead of smoking, like calling a friend, going for a walk, taking a shower. So in the same way, yes, he was helping us to change that habit, that thing that we reached for, that cue that made us want to reach for that, and then to replace it with something else that still gave us a positive response.
Okay, right, right. So you've really found an ally in Rocky.
I did. Yes.
Having help along the way is really, really valuable. So,
Yes.
Wendy Correa, this is your book, My Pretty Baby, and I'm wondering what's next for you. You've got your book out in the world. It's available anywhere you want to find it. What are you going to do next? What's calling to you?
Well, what's really calling to me is I love doing podcasts and
Mm,
radio and just getting the message of my book out there that healing is possible. And I want to reach people who maybe are just starting their healing journey. And in writing my book, my hope is that by telling my story, other people will be less alone in theirs.
hmm.
And so I am doing podcasts and radio. A number of podcasts are being released, as well as I'm on panels. For instance, at the Tucson Festival of Books,
Hmm.
I'm on a panel there at the San Diego Writers Festival in March, March 28th, on the beautiful Coronado Island at the public library there. I'm on another panel. And so this year is pretty much about getting the message out. I'd like to talk at some treatment centers.
Mm,
I would love to talk at here in Denver, there's a wonderful organization called Judy's House, which is specifically for children who have lost a parent.
hmm.
So I would like to go and talk to social workers and other people that work with children, people that work in grief, and just keep getting the message out that it's important for us to have these conversations that our society, all you have to do is look around to see we are in desperate need of healing. And that can start with us individually to be the cycle breaker in your own family, perhaps, or to be a support person for another person who is beginning a healing journey. And again, I want people to know that while trauma is universal, so is healing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'd like to have these conversations without the stigma, without the shame, and for us to be able to talk openly and honestly about how to make changes in our families, in our society.
Mm. That's beautiful. Thank you, Wendy. So people can get in touch with you at your webpage, right?
Yes,
WendyBCorrea.com. That's correct.
yes.
Correa, Wendy B. Correa. Any other final thoughts or encouragements for our listeners?
Well, in terms of dreams, I did want to say, as an adult, I got married very late and I was having my son very late, but I had another Jungian peak dream. I was only about 3 months pregnant, so of course I had no idea what I was having, but I dreamt that I named my son Matthew. I had a friend who was a midwife, and we were doing prenatal yoga together. And and so when I woke up in the morning, I told my husband I had a dream that we were having a boy and we're naming him Matthew. And my husband, who is from South America, said, "Well, in Spanish, that would be Mateo." And I said, "Well, that's his name. If this is a boy, that is his name."
Uh-huh.
And it was so strong and so vivid. So I went to yoga that morning, and there was my friend Jewel, the midwife, who was about 4 months further along than I was. And I said, "Jewel, do you by any chance know what you're having?" And she said, "Yes, I'm having a boy." And I said, "Oh, do you know what you're naming him?" And she said, "Yes, his name is Matthew." And I said, "Well, wait till you hear the dream I had last night." And so Matthew and Mateo have been soul brothers since they were in utero. And now they're almost 30 years old and they're
Mm,
still very, very close. And so I believe that dreams can inform us, they can guide us, they can lift us up, they can help us in making decisions. And I think that it's very healthy for people to keep a dream journal as just another one of those tools to help us and to guide us and to help us to be strong and to be insightful and to listen to our own inner wisdom.
beautiful, beautiful words, Wendy. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you. My
Okay.
pleasure.
All right. Well, good luck. Hope you have sell a lot of copies and reach a lot of people with this incredible message of healing.
Thank you so
All
much. Your lips to goddess's ears.
right. That's it. All right. Okay. Well, thank you all for listening. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz, and we are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific at ksqd.org. The podcast is released on the Monday after the show. It spreads interest in dreaming when you subscribe, rate, and review. I am Katherine Bell. You can find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. Email me at katherine@ksqd.org. That's KATHERINE at ksqd.org. Follow Experiential Dreamwork and hashtag the Dream Journal on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to keep up with the shows. I'd like to thank Rick Kleffel, Nyanko Nasu, and Eric Nelson. Audio editing is by Suki Wessling, and intro and outro pieces are both by Mood Science. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.